All right, we already have 9 people on the call.
I think let's give him 2 minutes. He starts at 12, so.
So we have Brandon, Isaiah, Jerry, Pedro. And for those of you who have just joined us, if you want to make any comments, feel free to share in the comment section. Throughout this time, we'll be fielding any questions. You guys are awfully quiet. This is intense.
Yeah.
All right, it looks like it's dead on 12. Daniel, you want to take us out the gate on this?
Let's go ahead and start this one off. I'd like to take a moment to introduce Tracey Mayer with Honeywell. She is the Senior Global Director of Operational Resilience and Compliance, correct?
Yes, new title.
Quite a long new title. I wanted to invite Tracey on, not only because she has a lot of connection with the military community from her family, her daughter's in the Air Force and has some past history in her background, but more so because she's an exceptional professional in the resiliency space. Someone that's been at it a long time, has been operating programs of excellence for a great amount of time, and is now at a program that just is one of the beacons of resiliency, something that you would want to make sure your programs strive towards that level of excellence. So I wanted to break her in to put her up on the pedestal there with that, and then say, how could we do it? What kind of insights can she share, and how to be successful in the industry? And I just wanted to bring her on to kind of share her experience with you, so that you have that perspective of not only just when we bring on maybe a military service member who's been successful in their transition, but someone in the industry who hasn't gone through that process, but still has this amazing program and this amazing career, and be able to use that to your kit bag. So I'll go ahead and pass it on, Tracey, with that big intro, and hopefully everyone enjoys what Tracey has to share with us.
Perfect. Thanks, Daniel. And I'll just start sharing my screen as well. So I am thrilled and honored to have been asked to come and present to you. So just give you a little sense of background. As we were just talking about, so I was at Honeywell, or started at Honeywell, really focusing on business continuity, crisis management, supplier resilience, and technology resilience, or disaster recovery, but was recently asked to take on a larger role. So stepping into the leadership role for resilience, but also asked to take on our compliance teams as well in our security area. So it's an exciting new opportunity. I'm 2 weeks in and still learning a lot. But my journey into resilience has been, I would say, I guess I'm going to say different, but I think everyone's journey into resilience is different. I'm always interested when I talk to someone or interview someone to find out what got you into this role, because no one goes into college and says, I want to be a resilience specialist or I want to be a business continuity specialist. I think people organically have fallen into roles, at least most of the people that I spoke to, and that's definitely what it was for me. But I've also, just to point out too, I've got 2 levels of the DRI certifications, the CBCP and the CBCV, and I'm very thrilled to work with DRI, and I'm work with them as part of doing some of the assessments as well. But I'm also on the CI advisory board, as well as being a DRI commissioner. I have had the opportunity to work with many large Fortune 500 companies in my career, GE, Dell, Honeywell, even Meta, Sony Motion Pictures. I started my journey more as, I guess, in the supplier area when GE had a technology division where we were selling quick ship and mobile recovery units either to customers or through older companies such as SunGard, Comdisco, for those of you who are familiar with those names, they're really no longer in the industry these days. But ended up coming back and really becoming more of a practitioner within GE, within the company. Did that for a number of years, and that's when a few years ago, GE Capital, because I was working for the banking arm, which was considered banking and working with the FFIC industry, decided as they were splitting off GE Capital to become a consultant for a few years. And that gave me a lot of great experience as well, working with various companies such as Meta or Facebook, standing up their business continuity program. Went into Dell and was asked also to help Dell reset their business continuity program and write Dell's global technology resilience standard on how they recover applications. Univision, Southern California Edison, Colgate-Palmolive, Sony Motion Pictures. So different industries, different experiences. And I'm going to touch on that as well in the presentation. But as Daniel said, I am not in the military, so you will not see me or hear me using acronyms associated with the military during this presentation. I listened to some of the other past presentations, and I will not be able to align to that. And I tease my daughter. You can see my daughter and her husband on the one side, that when they start talking E level, B level, or whatever they say in acronyms, I say, whoa, slow down. I am not going to remember that. You need to spell it out. And I'm also going to give you that tip too. When you get into the resilience community, don't expect that everyone understands what an RTO is or an RPA is. You need to make sure when you're talking to leadership, you dumb it down, essentially, is what we talk about. But yeah, so as Daniel said, I have family that are in the military. My daughter and son-in-law in the Air Force. The top one is my cousin, who is in the Canadian military. He retired and ended up as a chief warrant officer, which he tells me is one of the highest levels in the Canadian military in that area. So proud of there. And then my father-in-law is also retired in the military, Sergeant Major Joseph Mayer. He did his full 25 years and then retired and then went into the IT field and is still working today. So I am very proud of my family as well as all of you, and I thank all of you for your service and giving me the honor to come and present today. I also want to talk a little bit about Honeywell before I get into the presentation, because I'm really proud to be a part of Honeywell, or as we call ourselves, future shapers. And you'll see if anyone presents or posts on LinkedIn that we are future shapers, because we're constantly thinking about the future and how we can shape it. But we also have what we call at Honeywell Hiring Our Heroes program, which it is linked to the SkillBridge program, where we work very closely with the SkillBridge and where we look at hiring. And I only recently found out about this fabulous program. And in fact, we're now having some folks come into our HGS team and present about it to see how we can leverage this from an internship program and support veterans that are looking at getting into the different areas within Honeywell. I do know there are areas that do use it, but our Honeywell Global Security team, where our resilience team lies, which is a lot of the cyber activities at Honeywell, has not leveraged the program before, but I'm looking at taking it forward. And I wanted to thank Daniel too, because it helped bring it to my attention that we can continue to support the military in this way as well. But aside from that, building a program, this is what you came to hear about. I would say there's lots of different ways to start. Everyone has a different opinion and different process. So I'm going to talk you through how I've looked at it and what I've learned over the years, because I've had to work with many companies to build programs, as I mentioned, whether it was Facebook or whether it was Sony Motion Pictures, Dell, Honeywell, that I would say there's a perfect way to do it, in the sense of you need to first understand the company's culture. You may build a program for one company and go into a different company, and it won't work there, because you might need to adapt based upon the culture. And I'll use the example, when I first started working for Facebook, you kind of go in there, what's the organizational structure? How does it look? Well, at that time, Facebook didn't believe in hierarchy. They had no policies and standards and no documentation. They were kind of very much They build as they go. They like to break things, and I think that's one of their mottos: just break things and see if we can break it before we move forward. And so, not as much structure. So having to create a program where I'm used to a lot of structure and documentation, had to pivot for a company that had that different type of a culture. But I would say one of the things is, when you look at how to start your program, I always start and say, find your champion. Find someone with the company, because resilience is not an individual sport. It takes a team. And you want to make sure you've got champions that can help you, and a leader. And that's where I look at it. Who is a leader within the organization that will be your champion? It could be the CFO. It could be your boss. It may not be your boss. For example, at Honeywell, while we report into the legal team, it was the chief financial officer that is one of our strong champions and advocates, and provides a lot of support because of a situation that took place where someone didn't pay a bill and they shut the power off at one of our largest companies' sites down in Mexico. And that's when it brought to his attention, because realizing that there were 800 people that couldn't work for 2 days because someone and the finance team forgot to pay the bill, and he realized that that's something very important. And that was pre-COVID, before everyone had laptops and could work from home. So he took that on, and very much has become a champion within Honeywell for resilience. And so that's where I'd say, find that person that can help be your voice on the leadership team and provide support to you. From there, my next one that I'm very passionate about is words matter. That anytime I go in and start working with a company, I want to start with something very basic, and you may laugh, but a glossary of terms. Because I've gone into companies and I say, what does business continuity mean to you? And they start talking about disaster recovery and applications, or what is disaster recovery? And they're talking about IT or business continuity. And people are using words interchangeably and not understanding it. And so when you have conversations, you say business continuity, and the other person on the other side is like, yeah, okay. They're thinking maybe technology and not business processes. And I say, this is something to build cross-functionally and make sure that you get support and engagement from other teams. Like if you're building your glossary and you have RTO, recovery time objective, or if you have risk accept, look at partnering with the audit team, compliance, enterprise risk management, IT, to say, come to an agreement that everyone agrees on the terms that are used, because some of the terms you may use within your resilience program may not be yours. And I kind of use risk acceptance as one, is that while we may use it, the risk acceptance process within many organizations are owned by enterprise risk management or an audit function or a compliance function. But the great thing about that is, when you're engaging with other teams to participate in the development of a glossary or get agreement on things, that helps bring that team together. And a phrase one of my bosses taught me too, when they approve that document, it puts their bloody fingerprint on the paper that they can't get out of it and say, oh, I didn't know about it. It's like, no, you approved it. You participated in the agreement of this document or the user acceptance testing of a platform. But this is very basic, but at any company, I found it very helpful just to start with some of this. And again, with the socialization as well, it brings that broader team together. I would say form a committee as well. And I have in black brackets, plural, because this may be dependent on the size of an organization. I look at calling it maybe a risk and resilience committee, because we really want to drive more of that risk-based function around resilience. But having a team that is a leadership team that you may meet with monthly, every 2 months, quarterly, that you come in with an update on the program, as well as identifying potential risk. It could be decisions that this team would make. And that's where I would look at it as including people like your CIO, your CHRO, your chief human resource officer, commercial leaders, health, safety, and the environment, your marketing team. Having some of those key leaders that participate in your resilience committee that can help provide the support you need, as well as funding. But I think it's very important to, when you look at a committee like this, it's not going to them and saying, I did 5 BIAs, I did 5 BCPs. It's not about the numbers. You want to drive the value of the program that you have. And these are all going to be senior leaders that Their time is money. So come with important information, risk-based decisions that you need their input on so that they see the value in what you're bringing. At Honeywell, we refer to it as, if we don't have decision or good information to have a discussion at the steering committee, then we do what we call a paper update. We'll just send out an email to say we're canceling this session because we don't want to waste our leaders' time, and just send them a brief update with more informational, because there's no decisions that can be made. And this could be different structures too. Again, the culture and the size of the organization. You could have one at a corporate level. If you're a very large company, having a corporate steering committee to make those higher level decisions, but you could have business units that may have their own smaller committees as well. But how are they going to form and come together and report up? But it's also a good opportunity to get engagement from the different departments within the company. Your CFO should be a part of this as well, et cetera, to again bring that broader awareness and understanding of resilience to the organization. And then I next look at saying, what is my mission and vision? And I know in the military, you all have your mission, and I would say translate this into resilience too. This is where we want to define what is the mission, what do we want to achieve for our organization through our resilience program. So taking a look at it, how we can build resilience capability into our products and services so that we can ensure our company can continue to meet our customers' demands, and ensure that if an event happens, we can come out on the other end more resilient and stronger, and look at it too as a competitive advantage. And so as we start building and defining our mission and vision, looking at what is your structure. And again, this is where the culture of the company or the size of the company, it may differ. Do you need to have an overarching policy and different standards to support your crisis management program, your business continuity program, supplier resilience, technology resilience, incident management, and there's companies too to define something differently from a crisis, which is more larger strategic leaders versus site incident management, if it's something that's just at a site, or if it's IT incident management or cyber. So how is that whole structure of the organization going to fit in, and how does resilience play into some of these different areas? And as well as too, I look at it and saying, what is your training and awareness program going to look like? And again, this is something that as I look at working with different organizations, I pivot and adjust based upon size and culture. And then as I kind of continue to look at a resilience operating model and different starting points, a policy. Starting with a policy and a high level policy. And this too is if it's something that you may eventually look at wanting to get an ISO certification in this area. If you're a larger company, if you may get audited, or if there's board requirements, starting with that high level policy and getting that done. And again, at any of these points too, it's always getting buy-in from different leaders, ensuring your champion supports what you're doing. And then standards. So a little bit more detailed on the policy, and it includes how are we going to run our business continuity and our crisis management and the different programs. And then procedures. Again, another level of detail more on the how-to do something specific like a BIA, or how am I going to use a tool. Operating model. This is one of the things that we are starting to look at in terms of what is our yearly planning and how are we going to do all our activities throughout the year, and setting that up at the end of 2025, so everyone can look forward to 2026 and know what to expect. And we also measure people against this too within our organization. We define minimum requirements. So we write our policies and standards to what good looks like in terms of aligning to ISO. And this is something I would encourage as well, that don't write a policy or a standard based upon where you want to be at the end of the year. Write it for what a good program looks like. And then in it, you can have minimum requirements or maturity models to say, ultimately, this is how our program should be, but we're only in year one. And so look at having a 1, 3, 5-year plan in the back of it saying, in year one, this is all we're going to do. In year 2 or 3, this is what we're going to continue to grow. And it's something to reassess every year and how you might need to adjust and pivot. Then as you look at your minimum requirements, looking and going down to the next level of detail, your documented plans. maturity model. This is how we measure ourselves, where we have looked at creating maturity models for our different areas of crisis management and business continuity. I would say this is not something you would do in year 1 or year 2. It's something we moved to, where we came up with basic, advanced, mature, and came up with measurements for what those are. And what it does too is it shows how do we get from a 1 score up to a 5 and show that we're continuously improving. Now, the interesting thing, and this is a cultural thing too, when we announced and started sharing the maturity model with numeric values of 1 through 5, we had people coming to us, some of the VPs within the organization, I want to get to a 5 in 6 months. How do I get to a 5 in 6 months? And we said, whoa, you may never get to a 5, and that's okay. 5 is something that's going to cost a lot of money. It's full ISO certification, and that we may choose as an organization never to be a 5, but and that can be tough for some people to think about and accept, because they always want to be, that number 1, that top star. And so that was like a bit of a cultural conversation that we had to have with people as well. And capability testing. And so looking at testing, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, because that's something I'm very passionate about, is capability testing as opposed to exercising. The other thing, piece of advice I want to give people too is, depending upon the size of your organization, you may need to have a software tool. And I'm tool agnostic. I have my favorites, definitely, and ones that I'll use and ones that I'll stay away from, but that's a totally different conversation. I would say, and I say this from some of the years I was a consultant and working with different companies and evaluating software, a software tool isn't going to create your program or solve problems that you have. I saw many companies and talked to many companies that they said, yeah, we bought this program and they told us how to implement, but it's not working for us. And so the software tool has failed. And then I asked them questions. So what was your program that you had? What were your minimum requirements? What did you tell the software company to implement? They said, we didn't. We just told them to implement it as out of the box. So I kind of challenged back, was it the software tool that failed, or was it the company's program that failed by failing to have a program in place? I always say a software tool isn't going to solve problems. You need to establish what are your requirements and what is your program first, and then the tool should meet your program's requirements. I've also seen and worked with some software companies too, where we've given requirements to that company and they say they can't do it, that they need to change the program. And I would say that's not a good software tool to look at either. You want to make sure whatever tool you're using, that they are willing to work with you. And in all honesty, sometimes it's Excel and Word. When I first came to Honeywell, they were using the wonderful software tool of Microsoft. Everything was in Excel and Word. And I said, for a company the size of Honeywell, that's not going to work. However, it's out there in the news, but Honeywell is splitting into 3 companies. So as we're splitting into 3, there's one company that's emerging very small, and it's called Solstice Advanced Materials, where a lot of our chemical division is moving off to and standing up as its own company. And then Honeywell, then the bigger Honeywell is splitting into 2, Honeywell Automation and Honeywell Aerospace. So our aerospace division is going to become its own company. The smaller one, and we use Fusion, the smaller one is where we use the term spinning it off. There was no value in having them set up a large software tool at this point. So we are giving them all of their data in Excel and Word, and they're in, some may say they're taking 10 steps back because they're moving into Microsoft, but sometimes the size of the company, Excel and Word can help, is just what's needed at that time, versus paying a lot of money for a tool that is well, it's some of it's great. Is it really worth it for smaller companies? And so I would say really challenge yourself in understanding some of the tools out there and the capabilities out there, and look at that. As we look at the other thing is we implement it, always make sure you've got some good governance and do annual reviews. And this is where I've seen some people run into some challenges around the governance. If you're telling people in your policy or standard what needs to be done, such as you want them to do a tabletop exercise every year, every other year, how are you going to govern it to make sure that those things are being done? It's one thing to say in a policy or standard that this needs to be done, but if no one's doing it, then your program fails. So look at how you can put the guardrails around some of your requirements and making sure you've got an easy way to govern some of those requirements. And we've done it through some of the reporting, using Power BI to do some monitoring, different software tools, lots of different ways to do it without having to stand up a very large governance program or team. It can be done just with a few easy steps. The other thing, as I mentioned, I wanted to talk about was testing versus exercising. So many of us are familiar with a test when you're in the IT area. IT, when you're testing, recovering an application, how long did it take to get that application up? We've set our RTO as 4 hours. IT is able to restore it within 2 hours for the recovery time actual, or RTA. That's a pass test because we have measurable objectives that we say that need to be met, and that's more on the RTA, or recovery time actual, and the recovery point, or the data loss. One of the things we're really pushing more is around capability testing. And we saw a lot of this kind of coming out of COVID, where a lot of people said, we've got plans, but many of them didn't predict or plan for a situation like COVID, where it was global, where it was something that went beyond an hour of an actual test from a sustainability perspective. I found that in business continuity historically too, people really focus on tabletops, where it's like, let's get in a room and let's talk about it and let's pretend something happened and how are we going to talk through it. And while I think those are good and valid, I'm really trying to push more of that capability testing, in the sense of you need to do exactly what you say is in your business continuity plan. And it's, if it's a call center, I think those are some of the easy ones, failing a call center over. But we've done some things like we pretend that the tool that we use for printing out labels so that we can ship products, SAP, is down. Okay, I want you at that site, you need to print me 4 domestic labels and 4 international labels, and you need to receive a pallet of goods in to the system. How are you going to do that? Well, you said in your plan, this is how you can do it. Now action on it and physically do it. Show me those printing labels. And by doing some of that and making people actually walk through more than just talk through it, that's where you really start to uncover and see more of the gaps or prove capability. Because when we did that that test, those were the measurable objectives in terms of you have to print 4 domestic, 4 international, and show me how you're going to receive a pallet of goods into the system. They realized at the end of the day that because of some compliance requirements, while they could print 4 domestic labels, they weren't able to print any international because they couldn't meet export compliance requirements. And so it's something that was learned, and in looking at the cost to remediate that type of situation, it was cost prohibitive. So it was determined that that is going to be a scenario based upon probability versus impact that they selected to risk accept. And this is really, we're really pushing this, and it's interesting too. We're even looking at it for crisis management. This historically in the past, crisis management has only been tabletop exercises, putting people in a room and talking through a scenario. Now it's hard to envision a crisis situation and make it happen. We don't want that to happen, but we do want to test the team and test their capabilities. So that's where we are actually now putting more measurable objectives associated with a crisis management team and leaders, so that we will fail a crisis management team going forward using some of those measurable objectives, which is an interesting conversation to have with senior leaders, to say, you as the chief human resource officer, the VP of HR, didn't achieve what you should have done. You've failed and the team has failed. You need to go back and study a little bit more homework. So, and the teams actually are appreciating that, because they want to make sure when something happens that they're ready for it. Another one that we've introduced this year is what I call a manufacturing walkthrough. Many of you may end up working for a company such as Honeywell that is in the manufacturing center, where you have a line that's making a product. You say that you can move that line from, and I'm going to use one example, from Pune, India to Xizing, China. Okay, in order for that to actually be done, that can cost $500,000, $1 million. No company is going to say, yes, here's $500,000 to $1 million to do a test to prove our recovery capability. So we introduced a bit of a blend this year where it's a mix between a tabletop and a functional test, where the site leader or the site team at location, I'll say Pune, starts off and simulates a scenario that their site is damaged and what are they going to do? And they have to then physically call and reach out to the team in China and talk through the situation. And then they took an iPad and walked to the manufacturing floor. And the person in China walked out to their manufacturing floor and they walked down the line of the production and said, do you have this at your end? Can you do this at your end? And they had that conversation, that eye-to-eye virtual conversation to say yes. And at the end of the day, both site leaders signed off and said, if something happens at your site or even my site, we have the ability to back each other up because we had more of that mind connection. Because we do want to really test that recovery capability and our strategies. As we continue down our program and as we look at our annual cycle, my biggest thing too is you want to stay relevant. Look at defining what your annual communication and awareness strategy is. Plan ahead, be thoughtful about what do I want to accomplish next year? Where do I want to drive awareness within the organization? Do I need to implement some different trainings? Work with your communication leaders within your organization or your marketing team to how we can market internally. Because I always say, as we look at ourselves in our role, we're a cost center. We can't show, we're not a profit center, we're a cost center, but we want to show what I call VOE or value on investment. And so taking a look at that, I also recommend too, so that you can help show value, is many of you will have contracts or procurement coming to you and say, hey, we've got customers that are asking or telling us we need to have business continuity capability or IT technology resilience capability or resilience, depending upon what the buzzword is in the contracts. You'll have to verify to say, yes, if something happens, we've got that capability to continue to provide our customer those products and services. This is where I say keep track of that. How many inquiries are you getting from your company around the areas of resilience? You may not be able to attribute to say that contract for $5 million closed because of the answer I gave on business continuity, but you can show how you did provide support to that contract or that customer. And that's too how you can show the value on investment and why your program is important, because we're seeing an increase, not just in regulations, but customers coming and asking that before I buy from you, I want to know that if something happens, you're going to continue to provide me that product or service. If you start working for a bank, you have the FFIEC to stand behind. So I would say it's easier because I've worked in both industries, but not being in a regulated environment or banking environment, you need to look at other ways to continue to drive the culture of resilience within your organization. Another example of that too, where you want to drive some awareness, is a lot of companies will, and this is probably more of some of the larger ones, may have 5 locations. And they may hey, we want to look at some cost savings. We're going to close down one location and move everyone or what's being done at that location to another site that's already built up. Cost reduction, maybe we're creating a center of excellence, but have that seat at the table to say, great, fully support it from a business perspective. I just want you to understand, by shutting down that one location, you're now alleviating one of your recovery strategies, because before we could use both sites to fail over to each other. Now we've moved everyone into one site. We're only manufacturing that product at that one location. We've increased our risk profile, which is okay. But you want the people around the room that are making those decisions to shut down a site for cost understand just some of that other repercussions that can come out of it and be prepared for that as well. Stories versus numbers. This is something I'm really big on, and I think I find it helps too with leadership. And I mentioned it briefly in talking about the committees. Don't go in and talk about numbers. Don't go in and talk about the fact that I've done 5 BIAs, 4 BCPs, business continuity plans are approved. Yes, you may need to do that from a metrics perspective and that, but You want to be able to tell the story of the value of why you're doing the things, and how the actions and activities you're doing are mitigating risk. I use one example, and I'll tell people about this, that yes, we did do a business continuity plan for our GSOC, our Global Security Operations Center. Great. So, so what? It's a plan. But there was one time last year that there was an issue at one of the GSOCs over in India in the middle of the night, and they called their leader, and I laughed because Nathan tells me all I could hear was Tracey's voice in my head saying, we need to invoke our recovery strategy and our business continuity plan. This is what we need to do. And within 10 minutes, they were able to fail the GSOC over to their other location here in the US when typically everyone would be asleep. And they were able to then continue providing support to the customer. So how our internal customers. So how, it's those stories that matter more to get you the support from leadership to help support funding, not just the numbers of BIAs and BCPs that you're doing. Benchmarking. This is something too that I really encourage at different stages of your journey, is to find companies you can benchmark with that are willing to, under an NDA, sit down with you, and I would say similar companies to yourself, or ones that maybe you want to grow into, and have a conversation with them about what are you doing for business continuity? What are you doing for crisis management, technology resilience? And see where you're at compared to some of the other industry leaders, because that can also help you say, yeah, we're in a good spot, or I didn't think about that from a supplier resilience perspective. Maybe we need to pivot a little bit. But reaching out and working with other companies to get that benchmark is always a great thing to do as well. And I always like this one, don't let a good crisis go to waste. That again kind of goes into the storytelling, but when something happens, use it to your advantage. I wouldn't say right away, don't be that lawyer chasing the ambulance type of thing, but leverage it. We recently had the crisis in the Middle East. And now that things have died down, we're looking at how we were able to support our employees, continue to drive product to our customers and service our customers. And that was because of our leadership and the crisis management teams that we had in place, and leveraging that as a story in terms of why things are important. And even the teams have said, without some of the training and the preceding exercises that we put these teams through, they wouldn't have been prepared to deal with such an event as that. But don't let some of the activities that you do, and I'm going to refer to the term being one and done, but constantly think ahead. And I think that's one of the things of a good program leader within resilience. It's looking ahead to what's going to be happening in your program in 6 months, a year, 3 years. How do you want to grow it? But also take into consideration some of the evolving risks that you're seeing. What's going on globally if you're a global company, or what's going on in your region if you're just regionalized, where you're seeing increased risk in certain areas that may then need you to pivot where you're focusing on your program. Those were the main things that I had. I know I've done a lot of talking, and I don't know if there's any questions.
Hey, wow, Tracey, I feel very humbled in my spot. Like, I'm looking at my program now thinking, have I been thinking strategic enough? Because a lot of the stuff you're laying on here, we get in the space as business continuity professionals, and we jump in there, do BIAs and run that show on the tactical level a lot of times. But it's sometimes hard to put the strategic hat on as well. And especially if you have a small program where you're both the tactical and the strategic, you might have that problem where you're reporting numbers up when you should be reporting stories up, and you lose that audience, that executive audience, versus if I'm dealing with maybe a direct with the business unit, I might want to give them the bad metrics numbers and not talk about stories. But wear the right hat at the right time. And I think you really showcase some of those things that strategically that the BCs in this audience need to think about, and how they strategically represent their program, and how they go about program initiation and set that correct foundation with the policy, standards, procedures, get that buy-in, and be able to translate that over. Like you're saying, when I listen to you, I say job security, right? If you're Keith over here in FFIEC land, you don't really have to worry about job security. There's a regulation government says you've got to have this. But when you're in the manufacturing, you're other sectors, you're always covering your job. And I see so many BCs that lose their jobs unexpectedly. I mean, look at Robert Arco from Microsoft that recently had to move in and get another job. He was the premier program champion over there. He was building all kinds of amazing things. But if the program value isn't constantly in their mind, you're a cost loss on that P&L. So you really have to show your values everywhere you can. And you showing that you're getting the contracts and being a major portion of that contract value and showing that Honeywell has the resiliency. So communicating value there, but also communicating value in the GSOC where you've had active issues and you were able to resolve that. But the last thing before I put over to everyone else, I think the ambulance chaser side is really big because I get these calls from vendors all the time. They're like, hey, there was a shooting right next to your building. It's like the same day, like, at least let people grieve and everything before you come and like pick apart the carcass and try to get some value out of it. So there's like a right time for things, but don't let it go. Because we have like East Palestine over my company. So that's always prevalent and things like that. Or we had a major tech outage. It was 2-3 years ago, but I always anchor that when I'm going about building a strategy for manual train operations, why they need it and building those values of the teams. So I think the amount of things that you covered in here is such a short amount of time, but wow, there's so much to think about, and you really added value to this conversation.
No, thank you. And one other quick thing I want to share, just remember that one of the things I learned early in my career is don't go into senior leaders and managers and just talk acronyms, because and I failed very early on. We're going in and thinking I could talk RTO and RPO and BCP and BIA. And I know you guys too in the military have a lot of acronyms, but you need to go into with that story and simplify and talk about, don't use RTO or even recovery time objective when you're thinking about some of this to get buy-in from leaders, but you got to make it meaningful for them. And that's why I'm like, try and get rid of the acronyms out of your head. It's hard. I still do it today, and I've got to stop myself. We try and say too that if you write an article, if you give it to your mother, will they understand it? And if your mother would understand it, then it's going to hit home.
That is a good quote by Charles Bukowski that says a intellectual says a simple thing a hard way, and an artist says a hard thing simply. So you got to really know how to make it as understandable and comprehensive across the board. Yes, you're the subject matter expert, but not everybody else is. So how are you going to sell it? So.
No, exactly.
I'm thinking about the committees, right? You've got lots of committees. I think one of the things that I struggle with is when you have a different culture at the organization, and maybe that culture has become fatigued from the many initiatives that are ongoing. Right. How do you know when it's right to not have a committee? Because I like how you said we might have a committee, but we might not even meet if there's not a need to meet. Hey, that's a valuable tool to have there.
No, I think it is. And I think the other thing too is I agree that sometimes companies have too many committees. And one of the things I've seen too it's starting to become very successful too is people now understand the value of what we're doing. And instead of having a separate risk and resilience committee meeting, which is made up of senior leadership, those are now starting to fold and become 20 minutes on the president's regular leadership meeting. And that's huge, at least for Honeywell, to say that the president now wants you as a risk and resilience leader to come to their monthly meeting and present for 20 minutes on resilience. And he's there encouraging and providing support, which is fantastic. So I think that's way too with it. But we've got another, and at Honeywell, this is where we've got different business units or strategic business groups. I have another one though that they still are doing their risk and resilience committee as a separate standalone because the culture of that SBG is a little bit different than another one. And it could even be too when your leadership changes, sometimes there's an opportunity for change.
Yeah, Tracey, you really unpacked a lot of really good, clean strategy, and this has been really refreshing. And one of the questions I have for you, you touched on it in the beginning, was talking about understanding culture. For those military members that are transitioning, how would you say that they could go about this in a strategic way of understanding a company's culture before they're actually employed there?
Sorry, was that more for me, or it sounded like more?
No,
Question.
it was, yeah, it was for you, Tracy. It was just like, how do we better understand a potential organization that we may be going into? Say like we're applying for new BC jobs. What are some ways that we could dive into that and understand that better?
Yeah, no, and I think that that's important. So I think a few things is doing some research on the company, check out their websites. If some of the leaders, many companies out there will have their websites, they'll have links to LinkedIn profiles for some of the key leaders who you'd be reporting to. Try and get a sense from LinkedIn on that. But I would say don't be afraid to ask the question in the interview. When you're in an interview, and I say this to people, is yes, I'm interviewing you to see if you're a good fit for this role, but you should be interviewing the company as well, quietly, to make sure that that company is the right fit for you. And so it's just asking, and and I think sometimes there's different levels of the interview process. So you can ask the question, what's the culture of the company? Is it fast paced? Is it how does the company work together as a team? Does the senior leadership have support for the current resilience program, or is the culture different where there's no current senior leadership support? And is that going to be one of the main activities you're going to have to do? Because I'll tell you, going into a company where the senior leadership does not believe in the resilience program, you're going to be working an uphill battle. And I'm not saying not to take that job, but know what you're getting into. So any interview, I would say go prepared with 3 to 5 questions that you can ask to interview that company to make sure they're a good fit for you, or know what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah, and I like to share that with a lot of our mentees that are interviewing for new jobs. Is here's some questions to ask that could raise red flags, and you brought up a solid point. If you don't have leadership's involvement, you may want to ask yourself, are you prepared to stand up and fight that uphill battle? Because like I tell a lot of mentees, I'm like, if you find out that there is no leadership involvement or no budget, run.
Yeah. And I think it's getting the confidence of leadership as well. I mean, when I report into a man called Guy Grusper, fabulous leader, known him for a number of years. He came to Honeywell first, and then I ended up joining. Our first year to 2 years of the program, they wanted us to come, the leadership, very supportive, almost overly supportive, but it also had to do with a confidence, because there had been some challenges before within the resilience program. We had to go every month to the Risk and Resilience Steering Committee. And the number of hours to put some of those presentations together and to make sure we have enough meat to go to that level was a challenge into itself. But then within about a year and a half, we were able to regain confidence by, definitely leaders that were supportive, but felt that they need to meet with us on a regular basis so they could get updated. But we built the confidence. So then it became every 2 months, and now it's quarterly. So because they have faith and confidence that they know the program is running well, and if there are any off-cycle issues, risks, or concerns, we know how to put up our hand and say, we have a problem, we can't wait for next quarter, we need to have a meeting now, and we get their attention and they'll meet with us.
I got a question. If you don't have anything to follow on with that, Keith.
No, it's all great. Go ahead, Liz.
All right, so this is kind of a twofold question. So in your own terms, or the terms that Honeywell is using, can you describe or define the difference between risk and resilience, and then also what certifications you have for regarding the ISO standards?
Okay, so we're trying to really blend risk and resilience in terms of even the people within Honeywell that drive and implement our program, our risk and resilience leaders. because we want to be able to talk, yes, about resilience. Yes, we've got business continuity plans, crisis management plans, but we also want to bring forward and make sure that if there are risks, that either the business is going to risk accept, or the business or show the risks and the level of risk, so that leadership will invest, put budget aside to put risk mitigation plans in place. And this is where too, as we're continuing to mature and grow, and now that I've got compliance added to me, where we've got non-compliance, we want to make sure that senior leaders are aware of it. Because I've seen at other organizations where risks are seen as a dirty word. They want, and one of my other favorite things is, people show dashboards to leadership. They want to show all green. They manipulate the data to say, "Hey, we're great. Look at we're green in all these areas." But if you peel back, if you peel back the data, there's red. And I always say, embrace the red, fear the green, because there's got to be risk. There's nothing that's perfect, and people shouldn't be afraid to say, "Hey, we've got a problem in this area. We need to recognize it, because if that thing happens, it can take down the business." And if everyone's okay with it, we're good. And and we see that in a lot of manufacturing companies, because they built one plant to manufacture one piece of equipment or one thing. If something happens to that plant, they can't stand up another plant for 6 months to 12 months because of the time it takes to stand up a manufacturing plant. That's a risk. So do you want to set that plant up in New Orleans, where we know they're susceptible for a lot of hurricanes, and look at that from a risk perspective? No, let's have some of those conversations, identify the risk to build it there versus in North Carolina type of thing. And so that's where we're really trying to drive and leverage and lead with risk, as well as resilience. Does that help answer that question?
It does. The reason why I bring it up is, a lot of the folks that do these webinars, they're business continuity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they realize that they could be applying for a job that says operational risks or enterprise
Mm-hmm.
resilience. So they may not understand the difference. And I try to get those experiences, and then also define it and tie it into something, right? Where when you talk about ISO certification, they're told 22301. You go
Mm-hmm.
further in depth to 22313, but there's also ISO 31000 and 27000 that does crisis management, and then the resilience and enhancements. And so I like to describe those and then tie that to, like, okay, what have you done in your career that you just didn't? Oh, I knew the risks, I still got involved, or I knew the risk and I set my team up to be stronger than that, and then becoming more resilient. So from that civilian point of view, I just wanted to hear from you to like give us a better
Okay.
definition.
Yeah, and that helps too, because when I look at resilience, at least in our resilience program, we have business continuity. So that's putting those business plans in place to recover business processes. We have technology resilience, which is the technology arm. Do we have the plans in place to recover applications, as well as technology and infrastructure at a site? And then crisis management, and this kind of all falls under resiliency as we look at it. Crisis management, that is more of that when there is a larger event that happens, how senior leaders come in and they help support and drive the resolution of the crisis. And then we also include supplier resilience, where we want to make sure that our suppliers have their own resilience plans in place so that their failure does not impact us. And so how we assess our suppliers in their areas of business continuity, technology resilience, crisis communications too, to make sure they've got the right crisis communications plan, that when they have an issue, they know how to come back to us. So that's how we kind of define resilience then at Honeywell and what we own. But then we definitely partner with IT, enterprise risk management, that sets that high level enterprise risk, because we feed into any risks that we identify that can impact the company based upon the level of risk, making sure we're informing ERM. Now, not all companies are going to have an enterprise risk management program to line to, again, based upon the size. But that's where too, we want to make sure that our resilience leaders are aware of risks within their organization, ensure they're having those conversations.
So
That helps. I usually tell people like compliance is surviving, right? Just to keep your business afloat. But resilience is thriving. That's always over the horizon, understanding what those threats are and how to mitigate them and how to prepare for the future and be more prepared. And there's actually delineation in certain companies where they're just like, hey, I just need you to focus on making sure that when we get audited, we pass. But like you could greenwash it, like you said, and then obfuscate actual issues. And then what ends up happening is when an incident occurs and they've been testing it and then just like check marking the box, and then it doesn't fall through. And the next thing you know, you're like, what happened for the last three days? Why did our data center go down? They're like, it tested fine.
Yeah, I know. I would say don't confuse compliance with resilience. Two different things.
Yeah, I tell people the difference.
Yeah.
I wanted to jump back, Tracey, to you were talking about the testing program. You're kind of like that approach that you're using, and specifically like the crisis management team with like that give it a failing grade. Would you say that that's kind of the current state of maturity because your program is at that high level of excellence? Because I think with my program, if I went and got like a bunch of leaders together right now and I said, hey, you fail, they'd probably lose a lot of support in the program because they wouldn't.
I agree. Like it's not something I would say do in year 1, year 2. Again, that's kind of about the culture and the maturity of your program. That we've been doing tabletop exercises for years, and everyone's like, yeah, okay, this is okay, but okay, we want your attention now because we are going to put some measurable objectives in front of you, and to make sure that you're truly ready. And in that too, we want to give them more challenging scenarios.
Yeah, I have a question too. When it comes back to you discussing maturity models, that's something that was further down the line after a couple of years in the company. But would you say that providing those maturity models provided that transparency for those leaders to understand how they're moving the needle? And then when you provided that, did it kind of create like competition or gamification?
It did. It actually did. Because I've got one going on this year where I've got 2 CIOs that they want to get to this mature level. And one heard that one of the SBGs was going for mature in IT or technology resilience. The other's like, what? No, then I need to be doing it too. So yeah,
That's
there's
awesome.
definitely some of that competition. And the other thing too is we've got, and again, this is a Honeywell thing, and it could be a different company, other larger companies too. Because we've got large SBGs or business units, they each have their own maturity, but it can be that we have one group that what they manufacture is more around chemicals, and therefore crisis management and maturing more in crisis management is more important than technology resilience, because technology isn't as cure, but they need to make sure that if something happens, like a leakage of acid, that they have good crisis management to come together. Versus we've got another arm and that is more developing software. So technology resilience is higher in their mind, because as they're selling software, they want to make sure they've got the technology resilience in place to protect those services and the software products that we're providing. And so that's where, not everyone has to have the same maturity in the different areas as well.
I like how because you've got this culture to where they're coming to you instead of running away from you when you come and say, hey, I got a meeting to talk about, let's do your BIAs or get products in place, do an exercise. When you first start a program, they're usually running away because they don't want to waste time on you. But now it seems like it's ingrained into some of their review process, even to where their performance is getting assessed against that resiliency, where they want to be a high performer amongst their peers.
Yeah. And that's also going more towards the storytelling and working with people and getting people involved in the program as well. Because as I said, it's a team sport. It's not an individual. While you may be the one person responsible for resilience or business continuity, you want to make sure that you pull in other people that are stakeholders. Don't do it all yourself. Have that virtual matrix team.
Now these have all been great. Oh, go ahead, Daniel.
I was going to say, I really hope that this, for the people on the call, that you kind of take this stuff to heart, look through the presentation and this, check out the video afterwards to kind of review through the things that Tracey brought up, because when you come into bringing a program of excellence, this is the heart of it. It's not getting in there and doing BIA and doing all those little tactical things. It's really the design of your program at the start, and then carrying it out throughout the program and progressing and maturing it over time and finding new ways to leverage relevance in that industry. And Tracey really framed that well in the space. So.
Yeah, so I kind of pulled this slide back up too, but there's, if you want to take that, scan that gets right to my LinkedIn. But if any of you want to reach out, I mean, one of the things I'm also really proud at Honeywell is we do have a lot of former military people working. And last summer, when my daughter was here for her RAP, the Recruiter Assistance Program, for 2 weeks, I was able to set up time with some of the different folks with the military background, because she's still trying to figure out what she wants to do. And we have some people at Honeywell, and I know you've got the mentorship program here too, but that, we're in the military for short term versus long term, and just having different people to talk to, I think, is wonderful. So this is a great program, but I'm happy to share anything as well. So feel free to reach out on LinkedIn anytime.
Yeah. Thank you, Tracey. Any last comments going around the room? No.
Well, it's been probably one of the best sessions we've had in the space. So really thank you for your time. And, I want to get online with you later about that Skill Bridge program, because I have a lot of ideas in our side from the VOP with our resources. We're bringing in a lot of new talent and training them up and certifying them. There might be some overlap that we can work together on. So we should have a conversation later on that.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate that. And I appreciate everyone's time today, and Daniel, again, for the invitation. As I said, I was honored and thrilled.
The pleasure is all ours. I really, you blew it away with this one. So this is a great session.
Thank you. Well, take care, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. Take care.
Everyone.
Thanks, everyone.